Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. In for a treat today. The guest on the pod is Anton Lane. Anton is the managing director of Edge Tax Professional Services. Had a really interesting career. So prior to that, at one of the big four at EY, and has done a lot of stuff since. Just before we came on, we were even talking about TikTok and marketing in the professional services arena and what they're doing in that. Anton, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for inviting me. So
No, thanks for coming. If we could start with just a little bit about you. Did you always want to get into tax advice? How did you what sort of started you off in your career and how did it begin?
yeah, I'm not sure. Back when I did started on my tax learning tax, I don't think anybody really wanted to get into a tax career. I started. I was going to go to university, the London School of Economics, to do economics and social history, and for some reason, just that summer, just before I went through clearing, which you're not meant to do if you've got a place at university back then. And I got offered a place at Bournemouth University, who were doing taxation and revenue law. And my whole basis of going to university was the fact that half a dozen of my mates were going there. And they had a ratio of 5 to 1, 5 women to every 1 bloke. So I very selfishly thought that was a good idea. And sounds terrible now to admit that, but that was my basis: run away from my hometown and go off to university. And I got on the course and I thought about changing. I thought about trying to get onto business law and got told I couldn't. So I ended up doing taxation and revenue law at university. But by the second year, I started getting into it. And the course was sponsored by Ernst & Young, which probably leads on to how my profession started. And then in the final year, I got several awards at university. And I really did go, I'm going to live on my own in the final year. And I can put the effort into it because I'm going to have to get myself a job after university. So I got best final year student, highest degree, and best dissertation. So I cleared out the award on the course, and obviously sponsored by Ernst & Young. They then interviewed me and offered me a place in their Southampton office. There was nothing, I didn't really want to go into that profession, but I did actually find the last year, when you're doing the dissertation, you're going through all the case law and the tax legislation, how it applies, and you're looking at international taxes. And I loved trust law and corporate law. So these sort of areas that I kind of really sadly admit to really enjoying. And that ratio of 5 to 1 never had any benefit for me. I remember walking up to someone in the bar and I got chatting and they said, "Oh, so what are you doing at university?" And I told them taxation and revenue law, and they said, "Oh, that's great." And with that, they walked away. So it never had any benefit for me. So I concentrated on my studies instead.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, financial advice, I think, has a similar effect in that regard. But I heard good things about Bournemouth. I knew people who went there and they all seem to have a good time from what I could tell.
Yeah, the courses were very much vocational. So they were aimed at getting you into either a profession or into an industry. So with that really helped. And I think a lot more universities have gone that way now. Back 20 odd years ago, that was probably quite novel. But most universities are now designing that, get links with industry, get links with other professional services firms, so students get exposure to what actually happens in the real world.
It's the same in financial services. I think a few years ago, I think one of the Manchester universities was offering a financial services degree which aimed to qualify you as a financial advisor. And maybe one of the ones on the South Coast, I can't remember. I don't know if they're still doing it, but I mean, with the way things are changing, these sort of economics, I mean, since sort of we were at university, I think the economics of degrees have changed quite a lot. So I think ones who do offer vocational or sort of more direct line into careers, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it meant that when I did join Ernst & Young, I hit sort of providing not necessarily advice, but working on advice with my team, which was then the tax investigations team and employer solution. I hit the ground running. So out of all the graduates that got taken on, others would go and sit on audit, but I'd be out seeing clients, doing PAYE health checks, reviewing tax investigations from fraud cases right from the outset. So for me, it was really, really useful to have that background in the degree. And I think that's what probably helped progress my career quite quickly.
Yeah, it makes sense. So how long were you at Ernst and Young in the end?
Um, so I got to work it out. I was about a year in Southampton office, where I did employer solutions and tax investigations. And I went on the National Tax Investigation Conference and got chatting to then Bob Brown, who, for people who want to look it up, but there was a big Nissan Ford case many, many years ago, which he worked on in HMRC, or the Inland Revenue, when it was Special Compliance Office. And he got chatting to me at this conference. He headed that up, and he got chatting to me at this conference and said, how would you like to come and work in London? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And 3 weeks later, I was working in London. So it was a really fast move. Went to London, working with all ex-HMRC officers. I was the only person that was professional background, if you like, so doing the professional qualifications, and not had the exposure to working within HMRC. So that was an interesting time, a much a different culture, quite fun in some respects, but also quite harsh as well.
Must have learned a lot though, working if there were a lot of ex-HMRC.
Yeah, so I'm always differentiating myself. I always remember one thing I felt HMRC officers that came into the industry couldn't shake was this feeling that the person that they were dealing with was a naughty person. They've evaded tax, they're fraudulent. Whereas I was like, well, they tried to get away with something. Let's try and sort it out. It was a much different approach. I remember walking out of meetings and they're, well, of course they did that on purpose. And you're like, well, so what? But we're here there to defend them. So it's very much sort of different mentality. But I got taken under the wing of a partner called Richard Rees-Puddy, who dealt with performance artists and sports and media. So I dealt with, some really big international bands that are still going now, and you'd be amazed they're still going. So some of those really old ones, residency issues, through to supermodels, which was brilliant, through to footballers, and got involved in some really high profile cases. And did that in London for probably about 5 or 6 years before an opportunity came out to start developing the Bristol office. And the opportunity came up because I knew the director in Bristol, and I just started my you management training, senior management training and stuff like that goes on to hopefully partnership training. So I'd started and was going through that process. And
so you moved to Bristol still with Ernst and Young at that?
Still with Ernst and Young, yeah. And did worked trying to develop the tax investigations team in Bristol for a little while, but I got put on secondment, and that's where my career started changing. So I went on secondment to a large telecommunications business somewhere along the M4, and I ended up, it was meant to be there for a month sorting out some tax issues, but I was there for something like 7 months, living in a Hilton, which was not nicest. Get fed up with the menu after a while.
Yeah.
And the breakfast is too tempting in the morning, so maybe a bit of weight gain. But when I came out of that, I'd obviously experienced working in a different environment, and then I got approached to become start with a Big Four trust practice. So all the Big Four in those days, or earlier before that, it was the Big Six, but the Big Four had offshore trust businesses, and one of those was setting up a UK presence, and they wanted a tax specialism with that. So myself and another tax individual from PricewaterhouseCoopers then moved into that arm, took a small amount of equity, and this would be interesting for you actually. I ended up working in not only doing tax investigation work, but also working consultancy with high net worth individuals involving offshore trust. And I also helped set up a financial services business in Tower 42, and did all my qualifications back then. But I'm not a financial advisor.
How have we not talked about this?
But not a financial
Tower
advisor.
42, that's the old NatWest
Yeah, yeah.
building that's got a very lovely bar and restaurant at the top of it.
Oh yeah, very nice.
Yeah, I've been there a few times.
So that was amazing experience. And for what we do now as a consultancy angle, it starts piecing together the international angle, the tax investigations angle, knowing about the financial services allows then obviously to know when actually a tax solution is not necessarily the right one. A financial solution might be a right one. So
Yeah.
it's a wide or different experience to most tax advisors, which is good.
Yeah, we talk about this quite a lot because there's so many areas when dealing with private clients where sort of our role as financial advisors bleeds in. It's sort of right adjacent to tax advisors, and it's at what point do you hand it over and say, okay, actually, no, this is too specialist, too complex. Like we need to hand this over to a tax specialist. And I suppose that it works the same in reverse, and it's the same with sort of colleagues or in legal services. And that's an interesting one actually. Where does it trust work? When does that fall to a solicitor versus a tax advisor? Is that
So, um, so trust, well, drafting a trust deed, for example, is a restricted legal activity. So you would always involve a solicitor to draft a trust deed,
yeah
or a person that's authorised to do that. From a tax advice point, I mean, most solicitors don't like tax advice or don't like to give tax advice.
yeah
So we work with loads of solicitors. There are some really good firms out there that have solicitors that are also chartered tax advisors,
yeah
and advise on that. But I think, I've dealt with offshore trust foundations, offshore fund structures, family wealth. I was a trustee on large developments in Dubai. I keep dropping names of things, so I've got to be careful what I say. But so I've been a international trustee, if you like, and had that exposure. And to do those sort of see the development, then you get exposure to you're authorizing expenditure. You have to look at the project plans. You're learning a different set of skills as you go along. So from a journey or career journey, it's been great. But then you start looking at it from a tax angle, and you sort of understand the problems that people go through in either their property development or in their businesses, and your tax advice changes to think about how it will adapt to those problems.
yeah
So, the first 10 years of my life in the tax industry were learning. The second 10 years was sort of consolidating, and now going on to the third decade. It's
mastery
26 years now. So now you're sort of at the point where you've had that experience, and you can look back at all the sort of the advice you've given over the years, and you draw on that when you're looking at client situations now. But the offshore sort of trust, most UK solicitors wouldn't have necessarily got involved in. There's a few specialist firms, the larger firms again.
yeah
I won't name them, but I still have contacts with them, still deal with them, because obviously you need the legal advice, but they will normally defer the tax advice to a specialist tax advisor. And I think I always have come at the consultancy side from my background doing tax investigations. So I always look at it as what's the risk involved? How can we protect the risk? How can we advise the client and what they need to do in order to manage that risk?
yeah
Because inevitably, when you're doing something that might be more complicated from a tax point of view, HMRC were also going to see it as something they could look at where the numbers might be bigger if it went wrong. So yeah, it's sort of it's an interesting angle. I don't know many people. I do know a couple that have got a similar background to me, but there's not many.
so what is it? So this is a sort of maybe slightly random question. The news, you constantly see sort of celebrities, ex-footballers sort of getting in trouble with HMRC or whatever tax authority they deal with. What is it they've tried to do and maybe failed to do? And I know that's quite a broad.
Well, in the defence, and I've dealt with quite a lot of footballers and performance artists, in their defence, it's more the case of the people that manage them. And
I often think,
and I think that's changed.
They didn't put the structure together themselves. They were advised.
It's changed more, I think, nowadays. But if you go back 10 years ago, and if you look at tax investigations, it takes HMRC normally anywhere between 3 and 10 years to catch up with something that's happened. So you might, somebody might be sat there thinking, I did that piece of tax planning. It's worked for the last 5 years, and then HMRC start looking at it. So it can take a long time. But you took was it Jimmy Carr? Um, uh, he did a piece of planning that was where he operated a second-hand car business, I believe, which he obviously didn't.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have known what he was going into. His management agent would have said, "Oh, you do this. It's legitimate tax planning. You're going to get offset losses, and therefore it will reduce your income tax. But economically, you'll be the same off." And they go, "Oh, is there any risk?" And the management agent goes, "No." And they have such a strong, trusted relationship.
Yeah.
Those management agents. I mean, I dealt with performance artists where we came up with a low risk solution for a performance artist who was only 21 years at the time of age.
That's young.
And the management company decided no, and they sent her off to Barbados or Bermuda, which sounds quite nice, but away from her family on her own for over 12 months in order to record an album. So, and for them, it was about controlling very much the artist. In order, you're not going to make much money, you've got to do it this way. We'll pay you a couple million for the album, we'll take all the royalties going forward because you might not be successful. And that's kind of their approach. They're very controlling over their asset base. Some people might not like me saying that, actually, but that's generally
interesting. So do the management companies take responsibility for referring on to the special, like the tax advisors or whatever other related professional services? Are they sort of working on it together, shall we say?
The large agencies, these are, so you might be surprised at a number of artists that are managed by a family friend or a local agent, and they've been there for years, and they don't have the experience and knowledge of the larger firms. Obviously, the larger firms are more involving as specialist advisors and nurturing their clients, but a lot of them coming through are managed by a friend or a family member or someone that doesn't necessarily have that experience. So they're kind of trying to do their best by their client, but they're kind of working their way through sort of a pathway where they don't really know what advisors can do or can offer their clients. So it's a bit, I'm trying, I say they're just very controlling. They're just trying to protect their clients or their family friend, etc. But at the same time, they feel that everyone's going to try and grab them for fees. And there are lots of advisors that will say, "Oh no, you can do a piece of advice. It might only take 5 hours worth of time, but they're going to charge 30 hours worth of time because the person's wealthy." There's that kind of approach with a lot of people as well. So I do understand it, but a number of them would be better off if they were open to listening to accredited advisors that have that sort of experience and that background.
Yeah, no, I get it. So you're in Bristol. You've set up the specialist firm. Is it your firm at that point, or does that come later?
No, I was talking. So I was, I just, we were selling out our equity of a practice I was involved in, which was the offshore trust one. And an American friend of mine just turned around and said, "Why do you set things up for other people? Why don't you set one up for yourself this time?" And I just turned around to my wife to be at the time and said, "This is okay. I want to try and set my own business up." And she said, "What's the worst that can happen?" And I thought, well, we end up living with your parents. But that was that has never happened. So yeah, no, it was very much, "Oh, we set this up." And for the first 6 months, I probably panicked a little bit about whether you get enough money in to pay the mortgage and you're going to get through. And then you look back after 6 months and it's like, it's working. And then you're employing people, and then it's kind of helter skelter, but good fun.
Yeah. How did you find that transition from, because I mean, I did a similar one from a very, very large corporate to a very, very small sort of business that sort of family owned. And I found that transition really odd. There's just the fact that everything falls to you. There is no logging an IT ticket when your email stops working, or choose lease agreements, supplier agreement, any number of tasks that are not to do with sort of the day-to-day delivery of the service, but to do with the running of the business. How did you find all that
I would say at one point I definitely found it very overwhelming. You don't have the speed to go in recruit. You don't have people to do your marketing for you or your internal accounting and trying to manage all these things yourself. And then slowly as you build and you get some help, there's a little sense of relief. Like one of the most important people we've had from a non tax professional point of view, because all my tax professionals are hugely important and they're brilliant, to be fair. But the support of like just a marketing executive and the right one, you can outsource it is one
Yeah.
option, but I guess if you outsource it, they're not there necessarily immediately. So we tried outsourcing. We had outsourced PR at one point. We had outsourced marketing, and then we brought it back in house. And then you've got to find the right person in house. And I got to be honest, the team I've got now, and it's evolved over probably the last 10 years, but the team we have now is such a solid infrastructure. You feel that you can recruit and grow at a nice pace. It feels like it's a bit more stable to do that. Whereas if you go back beyond 10 years ago, recruiting was always like, oh, it's a risk. Are we making the right decision? This could be, we might employ a tax professional on £100,000 a year, and you're going, right, is this going to work out? We've got the recruitment fee, and you've got all those sort of pressures, and there's always an element of risk involved. But I think once you've got that infrastructure in place and you become more of a credible firm, and we're not large, but we do have a good infrastructure, we do have a good reputation, and it's built up over a period of time. So you're never going to get there in the professional world. In my mind, you're never going to get there in 2 or 3 years. It's going to be 5+ years before you build that solid base. If you come out of a firm and you set up on your own, you expect to be 5 years before you start having a solid credential. You have good clients, don't get me wrong. You have good clients that probably will follow you, but to build on that takes time.
Completely agree. I completely agree. And I find it's very, very similar with the networking side of things. I think if people come into it wanting super quick, immediate results, I think they'll probably be disappointed. But one thing I've found is, I don't know if you would agree with this, but as you get older, you get far more patient. And that there's a real, I don't know, I find there's a real advantage to patience, and then sort of the dividends and the payoffs do come. And whereas they might not be apparent immediately, it's very satisfying when you see things sort of come to fruition, even if it didn't happen as quickly as maybe you initially planned it to.
Yeah, there was always one of the issues I had with the big firms is that if you think that I left, let's say 15 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, something like that, and you have your charge out rate, and you then have you must charge X amount and you must recover X amount. So you're always governed by your charge out rate, which is great from a model point of view and your business model. But there's always this boundary then to clients giving you a phone call and saying, is this something I should be concerned about? Because if they know I think I was £679 an hour when I left Ernst & Young, and if you're that sort of charge out rate and somebody knows you are and they're going to phone you up, they're like, oh, he's going to clock you for 6 minutes. It's going to cost me X amount of time. And we've had the same approach with intermediaries. So the networking, and I would advise anyone to do this, is go to the right networking event. I have to say that the private client is probably the best networking event we've been to, so thank you. But go to the right networking events, target the right sort of intermediaries, and offer to talk with them. Offer them, we turn around to accountants, financial advisors, and say it doesn't matter if you've got a query with a client, you're not sure, bounce it off us. At the end of the day, a client in the private client world, a client chooses their advisor. And in my mind, what we all want to be doing is to offer the best advice to that client. So, get a network and pick the brains of the people around you. Eventually, it will work in a referral, but be open to sort of discussing at a networking event and outside of a networking event, client situations, maybe on a no names basis if you don't want to reveal them, but just bounce it off. I had an accountant I hadn't spoken to for probably 6 or 9 months phone me up yesterday. I've got this issue with double taxation relief and permanent establishment of a trade in another jurisdiction. How do we work this out? And I'm like, well, I'll have a quick look at it for you, and I'll come back with some comments.
It's invaluable.
It's probably not worth me charging for unless you want some full-blown advice on it because he's got the care, but it keeps the relationship going and it opens the door for more.
I completely agree. That was one of the probably the unintended benefits when we set up private client network. I mean, I initially I didn't know any private client solicitors was who I was particularly keen to meet at the time. And it was mostly to establish a referral situation because our clients needed a lot of the services that they offer. And when they said, "Oh, do you know anyone?" At the time, my answer was no. But one of the unintended benefits is exactly what you just said. It meant if I had a query, just something that maybe wasn't going to get passed on, but I just like, can you clarify? This is the situation. And to be able to have a host of people you can pick up the phone to and we'll take that question.
Yep.
It's so different when you've met them and got a relationship with them. I mean, you really could not cold call a firm and ask anything technical. They're just not going to answer. They're going to be too concerned, which is who you are and why you're calling and liability and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's definitely one of the unintended benefits of the network.
Sometimes I was going to say sometimes you might, I might have a solicitor phone me, might be talking about a trust situation, and the solicitors just might not have thought the same way that I have on something, but they're more than capable of giving the advice.
Yeah.
If it benefits the client, that's fine. It's not. I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining a relationship with the solicitor. So eventually, something will come from it. It is a long game. I tend to think in networking events it's sort of 18 to 24 months before you start building it. But if you adopt that open to conversations outside of the networking event, maybe it's a bit quicker.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I'd agree. So you've been so yeah, we met, I think the first time I remember meeting you, I think we had a rooftop, it was a summer, I think it was a summer event, and it was a rooftop at Clifton Observatory. Was that the first time we met?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I tell you what, when the summer events work, they are lovely. It's just a roll of the dice when you're booking outdoor space.
I'd never been there before that. It was brilliant. I never knew you had to drink so much wine at a wine tasting event.
Yeah, that's true. So you guys, you got a marketing person on board. It's going really well. And you said you've been doing TikTok. I've been seeing your videos on LinkedIn. And I was saying before this call, I really like them, but I didn't realize. So are they primarily for TikTok, or is it just on every platform?
No, I think, so we use most platforms on social media. And I think that's just a presence. You find that the potential clients or the intermediaries will use different platforms and you gain followings elsewhere. But it's almost like you can't measure from a marketing point of view which one of them is more successful in leading to a client. You may get, I mean, we've had inquiries through TikTok, not that many, but we've certainly had more hits on TikTok than anything else. So that's kind of interesting. I would have said probably LinkedIn for us because most of our work comes from intermediaries.
Yeah,
it's probably one of the better for us, better platforms to actually get direct introductions. It just reminds people that we're there, and it's a support function. So it doesn't take away. You need to still know your base of intermediaries, and it's almost like reminding people you're still there, and that you can do a certain job. So, for example, if an accountant sees a video of me talking about property incorporation, for example, but they've got a tax investigation on, but they see me on LinkedIn, the two will correlate. I might get a phone call the next day. It's that kind of approach. It's very, I mean, you have to do it nowadays. And you have to do subject matters that are, I guess you have to do short reels that are interesting, and it has to be more than me. I mean, like Jonathan that works here is brilliant at doing his video. He's so much better than me. I mean, I get more hits on
I haven't seen it. I'll have to check him out.
It's annoying, but
hey, leveraging the talent of the team, I guess.
He does it walking around outside. I do it sat down trying to think, and I end up stuttering, going, and he doesn't. It's just clearly spoken. It's brilliant.
The walking ones, I do quite like them. I don't know why. Have you said like why? Because it doesn't make sense. Like, why would that be? Why would it be good? But so somehow, I don't know. Maybe it's a more informal thing. Maybe it just feels like you're walking with them.
I did one walk around the office once on tax investigations, and there was nothing significant on it, but the walking around the office, and it got a lot more hits. And I do think that movement and that stuff just probably from a video point of view appeals. Someone just sat there. Interviews appeal good as well because there's two people you're talking, but walking around seemed to work quite well.
I'm gonna have to put it on the list of things to do for our social media strategy.
Yeah, I need to get one of those sticks that you have that holds your camera out, and you walk around with your stick talking, which is. But as I say, he's done phenomenally well on those, and it's good to. I mean, he's 20 in his early 20s, and I mean, this is what I like about people coming into our profession is that where they have that enthusiasm and that drive, and Jonathan is so well driven and technically really good as well. He sort of as he applies himself to his career, which is really nice to see.
Here's a question for you. So, and this could be aimed at either other private client professionals who don't do what you do, or even just sort of general like end clients. Is there something about tax or personal taxation that you think most people don't know that you wish they did, if you had to choose?
I think everybody's. So the thing that always gets me, and it's slightly answering your question, but it's slightly off on a tangent, is that I would say most tax advisors in the profession that I've come across will deal with a problem that's brought to them. So a client will go, I want to save income tax. And they will focus on that one problem, saving income tax.
Yeah.
I think where tax advice and what I call true tax consultants do is they go, well, that's very well that you want to save income tax, but let's look at, same as you would do in the financial advice world, let's look at your overall affairs.
Yeah.
And then let's look at what you want to do over the next 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years and onwards. And then not just think about saving you income tax now. Let's get a strategy in place for the longer term that saves you tax during that progression over 5 or 10 years in a proactive manner. So we're mitigating your risk. It's always when someone comes to you and goes, right, I've got an income tax bill. I'm going to have an income tax bill this year. How can I save it? One, you've got limited options. Some of those options will be aggressive. Had they come to you 3 years before and go, right, I'm going to start not requiring all the money myself. How can I use that money? What do I want to do? I want to build some investment. Now we got some structuring involved, and we can do that planning in advance. And that's always going to be lower risk. It's always going to be better to do it that way. Whereas if people come to you too late on and it's an arrangement that they want to save tax now, they might be EIS or VCTs, or at worst, there are still some tax schemes flying around that they could utilize. But with that carries higher risk. But if they turn around 3 years before, and then let's say their income comes from a trade, they might look at incorporating. They might look at putting a holding company in place with a trading subsidiary so they can move money around, invest in one company rather than taking the money out directly, and all those sort of things. Or
should have had Simon on the call for this bit, because that is very much his world, the EIS and VCT solutions. Yeah. Cool. And one last thing. Well, firstly, thank you very much for being on here. If people want to get hold of you, where can people find you?
So they can find me our website is www.edge-tax.com. My telephone number or the office number is 01454 777 831. And it's elaine@edge-tax.com.
Hey, what about your TikTok handle?
I don't know.
That's why it'll be on the website, I'm sure.
It's really weird in the evening when you do that scrolling thing and a video of yourself pops up.
Brilliant. I've got to go take a look. Great. Well, Anton, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Yeah, look forward to it.